The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight, has the spectacle of sports ruined sports? Then, the leaders of the WNBA's newest franchise, the Toronto Tempo, on bringing women's professional basketball to Canada. That's all ahead on the agenda. When it comes to sports, there's something magical about watching a game with tens of thousands of other people. There's an excitement in seeing your favorite team make the playoffs. And winning in overtime? It's the best, right? But does that magic get lost when you factor in just how much money is spent on what is ostensibly just a game? From the exorbitant cost of tickets to the number of ads for sports betting to $20 for a beer, is the business of sports ruining sports? Let's dig into that with Sherry Bradish, Director of the Future of Sport Lab and Associate Professor of Marketing Management at Toronto Metropolitan University. David McFarland, writer and author of a forthcoming book called On Sports. That sounds like a logical title. And Morgan Campbell is here. He's an author, journalist, and senior contributor at CBC Sports, and it's great to have you three around our table here today. Let's start with, we're in baseball season. So, David, let's start with baseball. How is the experience of going to a Jays game today different from, say, back in the day?
Well, we can answer that question exactly because, as it happens, there's a film called Angels in the Outfield that was made in the 40s, the first one.
The original, not the Disney remake.
And they used live baseball games in Cleveland and in Pittsburgh for cutaways of what a crowd was like at a baseball game. And I'll tell you, it is shocking to hear what 40,000, 50,000 people in a stadium in 1950 sounded like, because it was amazingly quiet at times and at times amazingly loud. The crowd reacted on its own, without prompting from the Jumbotron, without all the let's make some noise. It was an entirely different experience.
Gotcha. Do sporting events today, Sherry, focus too much on creating a spectacle for the audience?
So my area is sport marketing specifically. And so I have looked at historically over the last 100, 150 years how it's changed and the arc has changed and the influence of P.T. Barnum and having something at every corner of the arena. And sport properties and teams have definitely leaned into providing engagement and entertainment for their fans. I think traditionalists push back. We saw pushback with the Jays when they retroed their facility, and long-standing season ticket holders had to think about, do they want to renew at this new price? But there's an active engagement in terms of how do we continue to engage our fans, both in arena and out, and so it's resulted in the entertainment value. They've really leaned into the entertainment factor.
Do you like it, the new way?
I'm so accustomed to it, and I'm accustomed to sport has become such a big business in all these latitudes. But I think we also know that in professional sport, there's tier 2 and tier 3 sports and teams like Savannah Bananas, who's disrupting the marketplace. And I think we're going to see, there's a lot of disruption in sport, whether it be through golf or other properties. And I think those are providing other opportunities for sport fans to consume sport.
I'm going to ask you about the Raptors because of all the local sports teams here, the professional sports teams, this is just my view.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I'm not, but I could be. It is the one sporting event which is the most dramatic assault on the senses for the entire time you are in the arena.
Yes.
And if you want to have a conversation with the guy who's sitting 2 inches away from you, forget it. You're not going to be able to do it. Do you like that?
With the Raptors specifically, or with in basketball in general?
Well, I mean, they're typical of the way it is nowadays,
well,
which is an assault on your senses when you go to a 2-hour game.
A couple of things we got to think about. One is that this is entertainment. It's always been entertainment. And unless you are a coach or some sort of exercise physiologist, someone that's strictly looking at how the players move and how they sort of prosecute the game, it's entertainment. And so now I think the question is, like, what qualifies as entertainment? How much is too much? So if you go to a U.S. college football game, these games drag on and on and on and on. But like the marching bands, the cheerleaders, that is part of entertainment, but we accept that because that's sort of traditional entertainment. So we realize even if it's University of Chicago playing against DePaul down in Indiana or in Hyde Park in Chicago, there's going to be a band there, there's going to be some cheerleaders. It is entertainment for the day. So now, I think what's part of the issue is when the entertainment becomes, like you said, intrusive and starts to overwhelm the product as opposed to complement the product. And you start asking yourself, well, what did I come here to watch? Did I come here to watch Jamal Shed run the offense in transition, show us his improved three-point shooting? Or did I come to watch somebody shoot T-shirts at me out of a can, right?
Okay.
And so to my mind, if the on-field product is that good, all you need is the other stuff to complement it instead of getting this other stuff to take my mind off of what I came to see.
Yeah.
We may not be able to resolve that issue.
But there's a reason for that. It's because of the consumer segments. I think the reason the Toronto Raptors is the one that comes to forward of our mind, the biggest spectacle in terms of entertainment, it's a reflection of who their consumers are. And they're the most diverse in this city, typically, younger, who are actually looking for that type of engagement with the spectacle and the experience. We don't see it as much at the Jays game because they skew a bit older. So there's a reason that you see the pattern of entertainment in the properties.
What about the cost? Is the cost of going to a professional athletic event beyond too many people nowadays?
I took my son to a hockey game. Well, this was some years ago now, and
which team?
Maple Leaf game. And the next day, my father and a friend had invited us. And the next day, my father said, "What does it cost to go to a hockey game these days?" Because he used to take me to a hockey game, and it cost like $7 to get into Maple Leaf Gardens. And I said, "Oh, gee, I don't know. Ron bought the tickets, but I got my coat on. Let me see." And I pulled out the ticket, and my God, it was like $300 and something to go, and
Per ticket.
Yeah, and so I suddenly realized that if a father and a kid, a mother and a kid, going to a game and parking the car and having a meal and whatnot, you're pushing $1,000 to go out to a ball game or a hockey game or whatever. So that's a bit unsustainable, I think, or a bit. I mean, there is something here I recognize of, old man yelling at clouds, but there is something for me that is getting in the way of athleticism. I love going to the women professional hockey games because that whole thing is toned down and you're actually sitting there watching a game instead of being, as you say, inundated.
Well, I've been hearing for years that if it continues going the way it's going, it will be unsustainable and too many people won't be able to go. Sherry, the stadiums are pretty full.
It's full.
People are buying $20 beers. They are buying souvenirs.
And tonight, it will be sold out for the Leafs game, for context of the date. And I think tickets are face value. If there's a couple left, you can get off Ticketmaster, $740, $750. So to your point, the market is still sustaining the inflation in prices. And we know in certain properties, corporate Canada really leans into those tickets and the partnerships. So in this economy, it'll be interesting how that plays out. But sport is really valuable to the corporate Canada as well, which is outside of the realm maybe of what we're talking about. But we still see corporations really leaning into the value of having affiliations with sport.
Well, Morgan, one of the reasons that I still like going to the Blue Jay games is that it's major league, and you can actually get in. You sit at the 500 level for $15 or $20, and it's great. Yeah. It's a great night's entertainment, and it's major league. Now, that's not doable in many other arenas in the NFL or, even the CFL for that matter. When people hear that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to make $500 million over the next decade or more, what comes to mind?
Which people are we talking about?
Well, I know his agent is happy about it.
Yeah.
I know he's happy about it. How about the average fan? What do they think?
Well, to your first point, I mean, the difference between baseball and every other sport is inventory. Baseball is the only sport that has both the giant stadiums and 81 home games per year, plus some more if you're good enough to make the playoffs. Whereas the NFL, they got the big stadiums, but 8 home games a year, 8.5 home games a year. Basketball, you have a lot. Basketball and hockey, you have a lot of home games, smaller stadium. Now, as far as Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is concerned, look, baseball does not have a salary cap. It has certain like tax thresholds, but it doesn't have a salary cap. So these players are going to make, the best players are going to make a lot of money regardless. Two, you sort of have to keep in mind that Vladimir Guerrero's job is not like your job. He is a lot better at his job than most of us are at our jobs. He's also in a field that has has this giant pile of money that they have to distribute every year, but very few people who are qualified to make that money. And the reality is he works in a free agent market. He never reached the free agent market, because if he had reached the free agent market, he probably would have pulled in a lot more than $500 million, because we saw how much Ohtani made. We saw how much Juan Soto made. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr., if he'd hit the free agent market this winter, he'd have been in position for that kind of money. And that's just the market they are operating in. So the question of whether or not he deserves that money, by our standards, doesn't really matter, because much like the fans paying $750 for a hockey ticket, this is what the market demands, this is what the market sustains, and for right now, it's what the market's paying for.
There was an article in the New Yorker some years ago that when players first started making these huge salaries, written by an economist. And to the shock of everyone, the economist came to the conclusion that given the revenue these teams were creating, the players were actually being underpaid.
100%.
So
How long ago did that article come out?
I think it's, less than 10 years ago, I would say.
Huh.
But I think it still holds true. I think that these are such enormous revenue creators that there's money to be had, and it might as well go. I'd rather it went to the players than to the owners.
You know who you sound like? Remember Bill Veeck?
Yes.
Bill Veeck, who used to own the Chicago White Sox, used to say, if there's a dispute between billionaires and millionaires, I'm on the side of the millionaires. So he was with the players in that one.
Well, think about it this way. We can single out Vladimir Jr. or Juan Soto as making too much money, but when these leagues sign broadcast deals, I think the NHL just signed a new broadcast deal with Rogers. The NFL, their revenue is increasing like almost exponentially, and no one says the owners are making too much money. No one says, Jerry Jones, you get too much money for owning the Dallas Cowboys. What we do is we praise their business sense, right? And whoever's receiving that money, we say that's a smart businessman. So Vlad Guerrero Jr., he's a smart businessman. He got some smart businessmen and women working for him, because he has $500 million, and the rest of us get to watch him play.
Sure.
I was just going to add, the ownership is really an interesting piece of it. One of the things I like to look at is what have been some pivotal moments in our market, because we have to check ourselves and understand the economics, in particular right now. It's going to be interesting in this city when the Rogers deal goes through, because ownership will be very similar across the board in Bremner Street.
That's where the Sky Dome is.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry,
The
Rogers
local
deal.
references.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be really interesting in terms of there's not a lot of other competitors and big owners in the market after that point. And so I think that'll be really interesting to follow that case.
Let's talk gambling.
Do we have to?
Afraid so, or gaming as they like to call it. We launched in the province of Ontario in 2022 legal sports betting, and this is from a Maclean's feature by Anthony Milton, written a few months ago. Sheldon, you want to bring this graphic up, and I will read along for those listening on podcast. Each of these companies is aiming to become part of the fabric of Canadian sport itself, to make gambling on a game as much a part of the experience as hot dogs and Cracker Jacks. Arguably, they already have. The rapid integration of sports media, franchises, and betting operators was part of a long-term strategy for the gaming industry at large to become an indispensable part of the sporting experience. Okay, David, let's get started on this. The introduction of legalized sports gambling and how that has changed the sports fans' experience.
Well, I shouldn't swear in response to the quotation that you've just read, but that's my response.
You're not a fan.
There is nothing good to be said about gambling. Nothing good to be said about it. The sports leagues caved into it completely. It's tarnished the games. All the games that have been sullied by it. There's really, in my view, and again, perhaps old man yelling at clouds, but it's a catastrophe, a complete catastrophe.
Why?
Well, it undermines the very spirit of sport. When I wrote on sports, I had to recognize the fact that I had this love-hate relationship with sports, that I loved it very much. I'm someone who, when I first stepped on to center court at Wimbledon as a journalist, not as a player, to my surprise, I burst into tears. I didn't just get a little bit misty. I actually burst into tears because I recognized that I was standing on holy ground. And so that kind of feeling, which I think a lot of sports fans have, that these places are sacred places, these endeavors are important things, are completely undermined by just the craven lust for dough, I would say.
When I go to Fenway Park in Boston, I always say to myself, that's where Babe Ruth played, and Ted Williams, and Carl Yastrzemski, and I know what you mean by hallowed ground. How about the argument, Sherry, that by allowing betting, you sort of allow the casual fan, not the people who need to go to Gamblers Anonymous, but the casual fan to kind of have a stake in something and therefore put a couple of bucks in and it's okay?
I mean, and that is the argument. We definitely see when it became legal, you just had to drive down the QEW in Toronto and inundated with ads, coast to coast, or from one end of the city to the other. I survey my classes every term, and everybody puts their hand up. In sport business classes, they have some type of app or two or three. So it's out there and it's happening. I do think the students talk about, so I'll use that framework, that it does allow them to follow and be more indebted. It's part of that cycle and that churn that the betting companies want. And then I do a lot of work with women in sport, and so I would suggest there too is another significant problem. It has driven a lot of online hate and abuse and attacks for female athletes, and it's become a very large problem in terms of the betting in that marketplace.
Because of betting?
Yeah, really big. It started at the U.S. Open a couple of years ago. Certain players didn't win, and the online attacks of the women is seemingly higher than it is for men in that betting environment. And so the WNBA came out with just recently a task force to study abuse towards women online, and part of it is because of the betting.
Wow, yet another reason to hate betting.
Do you have any reason, Morgan, or let me put it this way, what do you suspect players feel about all of this proliferation of betting?
One, to Sherry's point, the proliferation of sports betting further dehumanizes a group of people who are already sort of dehumanized in the eyes of a lot of fans. And so instead of seeing this player as a human being, you see him as the guy that missed the field goal, missed the free throw, dropped that easy fly ball out.
That cost you $10.
Before, when it just cost your team the championship, now it costs you your parlay. And we've heard players like Tyrese Halliburton. We've seen coaches like J.B. Bickerstaff saying that they open up their social media, they open up their email, and there are these angry fans in here berating them about, you made me blow my parlay. Even though Tyrese Halliburton did not grab your phone and make you place that bet. You made you blow that parlay. That's not Tyrese Halliburton's fault. The other big problem with sports betting is that sport is a really powerful vector for a lot of things. Like, my parents got me into reading through sport. They got me a Sports Illustrated subscription. That's what got me interested in reading and writing. And I don't know that they would have captured my imagination any other way. So now you try to watch a sporting event, try to watch a Raptors game with your kids, try to watch a baseball game with your kids. Your kids are being inundated with these messages about gambling. Like, even Formula One, when I was growing up, McLaren, their car, remember Alain Prost was driving, and their car was like a big Marlboro cigarette box, right? They don't even have that anymore, but all these betting companies have direct access to your kids. And now the betting companies love that because you're getting people hooked earlier and earlier and earlier. And I don't know that we as a society, because in some ways it's not just about sports, it's the fact that sport is an easy way. You can get to a kid through sport faster than you can get to them through poker or blackjack or whatever it is. And I don't know that we as a society have even considered what the long-term costs are going to be of raising a generation of people who think gambling is normal, and as opposed to what it really is, which is addictive and dangerous.
The province of Ontario, Sherry, recently, I think it was last year, decided that professional athletes cannot be seen in ads
Right.
for gambling companies anymore.
Right.
Good move?
I mean, I think on the surface it makes sense, theoretically, but I think in practice there's a lot of other things that are happening and being engaged, and I think you just have to follow, for instance, what's happening at the Super Bowl and the biggest parties, FanDuel, and et cetera, and I think there's a lot of tie-ins with the industry and the players. They use a lot of former athletes in the betting space, but in theory it makes sense. You want to create distance, but I think there's a lot of other avenues that can be explored.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here. It's a legal product. Athletes participate in it. What's the harm in having them advertise?
Well, I think the impact on kids, it's one of the things that really bugs me about, one of the many things that bugs me about gambling is that so many leagues, particularly the NHL, had a fetish about you kids out there. They were like camp counselors. It's good for you to watch this hockey game because we're going to tell you how to be a good team player, how to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All this kind of wholesome stuff, meaning that sports wasn't sex, it wasn't drugs, it wasn't crime, it was a good thing for kids to be doing. And now we're saying, yeah, go up and watch the hockey game and sit down and watch all these ads. So I think it's enormously destructive, really destructive.
Also because gambling is addictive and harmful. It's not one or the other, it is both. And now we have pro athletes who, again, are powerful spokespeople telling people, yeah, it's okay to gamble. When 9 times out of 10, you're going to get addicted. And here's my other beef with sports betting, is that you see stories of people, like, one, for the most part, you're going to lose. So they tell us this is the best way to enjoy the game. And even like cigarettes and alcohol don't go that far in terms of selling their product as something that is going to improve your life. But all these betting companies will say, you can make money. No, but one, chances are you're going to lose money. Two, if you are the rare gambler who is good enough to beat the house consistently, they start cracking down on you because they don't want you to win. They want everyone else to lose. This would be like if I got you hooked on heroin but never let you get high. You just take the drug, you get the addiction, but you never get the high. What am I doing then? But this is what the gambling industry is selling. Like selling the game, but trying to get between you and the payoff.
To your point and to the question, the reason we don't see alcohol and tobacco advertising is because it was regulated very heavily by the government eventually, right?
Yes.
So
That's
a good observation.
Can I ask, Sheldon, there we go, wide shot. Who's done it here? Who's used their... You never done it?
No.
You ever done it? Never done. You've never done it. No. I've never done it.
I think we're an anomaly.
Yeah, we are unusual.
An anomalous group here.
Obviously, there are a lot of people who are doing it.
And Steve, you're probably going to get a call from a gaming company saying if you're interested in a sponsorship, right?
What should I do?
The agenda brought to you by losemoney.com. There you go.
Should we take it or what?
Do what you want to do. You're a big boy.
Okay. Let's, one of the things when we discussed at our editorial meeting doing this program, I get what we're doing here. We're trying to shine a light on some of the things that are concerning in sports, and yet, I don't want us to come off like we hate sports or that sports is terrible, because the fact is I think we all love sports, watch far too much of it probably, go to too many games. Are you concerned about conveying an impression that everything is terrible about sports nowadays and there's all these reasons not to like it, when the fact is, come on, David, we all love it.
People love sports. I love sports. And I think you're absolutely right that part of our passion about this, part of our outrage about gambling, for instance, has to do with the sports are beautiful. They're fantastic. At the level of athleticism, it's really extraordinary. And yet I feel as a fan, if I can describe myself that way, I have to sort of fight through all this stuff to actually get to the athletic endeavor. And then I stay focused on it, and it's amazing, amazing, amazing. The athletes are amazing. Oh man, it really pushes my buttons, this gambling thing.
Are you concerned that we're coming off as too critical of something that the vast majority of people love?
It's an industry that, it is an industry, so you need some critical analysis of every industry. I concur with you, and probably you, Morgan. I played varsity sports as an athlete. That's why I got into sport business.
What'd you play?
Volleyball. And went to grad school in Florida, did the whole thing. I think at its purest form, I went to the Olympics last year, which I was fortunate to do. Sport is phenomenal. It's phenomenal for bringing countries together. It's phenomenal on many levels. There is a layer to sustain it at a professional level in this country. That is a lot of money for a lot of people in a very soft economy, which is something to follow from the business perspective. I will also say, if we step back, and admire it, from my lens, from a marketing management lens, if you look at what's happening in North America in terms of industries that are growing, sport is still growing. And corporate money, and what's new, which will be, the next part 2 of this, venture capital money is significantly coming into the field of play. And so at its core and its pure form, it's a phenomenal experience, and the athletes are phenomenal human beings.
Are you able to purely, truly enjoy it? Or is the critic inside you always on the lookout for something?
No, absolutely. So what draws me to sport is what draws a lot of people to sport, but don't really think about why they're drawn to sport. You love and appreciate seeing what people are capable of doing. You've dedicated your life to mastering the craft. You get a bunch of those folks together and you put them in competition just to see how good they are at basketball, running, swimming, whatever it is. And also the fact that we, as a species, as human beings, we love stories. Each athlete has a story, each team has a story, and each competition is a story. And that on-field competition, what we like about it is that it's not scripted. We might think it's predictable, but it's not, and we get these plot twists. So the problems we see with talking about the things we're talking about today is when sports get corporatized, that can diminish the quality of the product. Because if I'm the NFL, I had 16 games a year, regular season games. Now I have 17. Maybe I want more. Maybe I want 18. I want the season to be longer, but I don't want the athletes to take drugs. But this sport is brutal. And so something is going to have to give. Often it's the athletes' bodies, and that diminishes the quality of the product. Or the athletes themselves have to hold back because they have to play 17 or 18 games now instead of 16. And in terms of gambling, like the specter that's overhanging all of this is match fixing, especially since we are raising a generation of young men and young women who think gambling is normal. And so what's stopping them from gambling the way they gamble when they grow up? And so what we don't want is this idea that this match is fixed, that it's scripted, that the outcome is predetermined. There already is a forum for things that are like sport, but with the outcome predetermined. That's pro wrestling, right? Which is fine. I watched a lot of wrestling growing up, but it's very different from boxing because the outcome is not scripted. So what we're talking about are these things that sort of chip away at the things that we have always loved and still do love about sport, which is very different from saying I hate sport now because of X, Y, Z.
Can I just add, I think, too, what I'm very optimistic about, and I think part of this is because of the women's market, is sport is becoming very athlete-centered. Whether it's been at the college level in the NCAA, through storytelling that we see in a multitude of platforms. And I think the shift will continue in a very positive way on the sports space. To give the athletes, professional and college, more voice. And I think that's really important.
Let me follow up with you on that because we got about a minute to go here. And one of the kind of really nice developments we've seen in the last decade or so is the increasing prominence of women professional athletes. WNBA, Professional Women's Hockey League, New Women's Soccer League. It's kind of historic, the moment we're in right now. Can we keep it pure, or is it inevitably going to have some of these issues that we've been talking about here?
I am highly optimistic. I think there's always outliers, but I'm highly optimistic with the people and behind and the athletes in front of those three leagues in particular in Canada. And it's so exciting and so overdue that in the last year we've gone from theory to reality of professional women's sport in this country.
Yeah. I went to a Scepters game, Toronto, the women's hockey team, I guess a month or two ago. It was great.
Yeah,
it's absolutely great.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And they're not making millions of dollars, so you know they're playing for the love of the game. And it's really, not that the guys don't love the game, but It's different.
It's pure.
Yeah, there is something different about it, that's for sure. Okay, I have time enough left to thank David McFarland over here on this side of the table on sports. Look for it, his new forthcoming book. Sherry Bradish and Morgan Campbell on the other side of the table. Great to have all of you here at our table on TVO tonight. Many thanks.
Thank you.
How do you build a new basketball franchise from the ground up? For the founders of the WNBA's Toronto Tempo, the question will go from theoretical to actual when they make their professional women's basketball league debut in 2026. Joining us to discuss that and bringing the lead to Canada, we welcome in Phoenix, Arizona, Monica Wright-Rogers, former WNBA player and general manager of the Toronto Tempo. And with us here in studio, Teresa Resch, president of the Toronto Tempo. Teresa, delight to meet you. And Monica, thanks for being there on the line from Phoenix, Arizona for us. And I'm quite excited about this. I want to learn all about this. Many cities wanted a WNBA team, but Toronto got it. Teresa, how did that happen?
Well, only the WNBA will truly be able to answer that question because they decided. But I think it was meant to be because of our support of women elite athletes across the board for many, many years, just as a society, as a culture. There's also been an incredible investment from corporate Canada in basketball and sport, specifically women's sports most recently. And we had an incredible sold-out WNBA game prior to us being awarded, and I think that really gave the league something to look at and
How many
to think
people
about.
showed up to that game?
Sell out in minutes at Scotiabank Arena.
20,000 people.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And
I remember that. That was pretty
It was
neat.
an incredible atmosphere too. I had worked for the Raptors for 10 years before I took this job. Was in that arena when we won a championship, and that game felt different. And not better or worse, but just different. And the group of people that were there to support it really, really told an incredible story. And it was really great as well for the league because they're looking at expanding the league, right? International we will be the first team ever outside of the U.S. And they brought on some investors. So they raised $75 million capital raise back in 2022. And one of their stated goals with that influx of money was to grow the game globally. And I think that this team is a stepping stone to really growing that league globally.
Gotcha. Monica, the team starts playing basically a year from now. What do you need to do between now and then to be ready for the opening tip-off, I guess?
Yeah.
Tip-off, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot to do on my checklist, but first and foremost, I really want to ensure that I'm bringing on talented individuals that are a great culture fit to help steward this team to victory. And so as I'm looking to hire staff, as we're going through interviews, I think it's really important that we have the right minds at the table in order to help build this team out. Now, once we get to a point where we have an on-court philosophy and we know how we want to play the game of basketball, I think that will give us a great leeway into the expansion draft, free agency, and the WNBA draft and that's where we'll be choosing players.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? You got to decide whether you want to be a bruising team or a finesse team, a speed team. Have you made any of those decisions yet?
No, I think it's important to have a head coach in place because they'll be the ones really managing that talent on court. And so that decision will be made collectively together once we do have a coach that has their philosophy in place and we can work together on what talent would be a great fit for that.
Teresa, does it matter if the coach is a man or a woman?
No, we want the best talent. And ultimately, Monica, as a general manager, is going to hire an incredible head coach for us. It's funny you asked that question about, what kind of player we're going to have. I mean, I feel like with the name Tempo, we better have a good pace to our game, right, Monica?
Up-tempo. You want something up-tempo.
Right, up-tempo.
Yeah.
But I think more than anything, what I've learned, even through the hiring of the general manager, Monica is exceptional, and she definitely stood out in that process. But what I learned is there's a lot of great talent out there, and they're all really excited about Canada, and they're really excited about the WNBA to come here. So I think that we'll have a lot of people interested in this role of head coach. So we'll get to pick someone that's really, really talented and that's going to work well with how Monica's envisioning this basketball, as well as our owner, Larry Tenenbaum.
Okay, so Monica, I should ask you, obviously in women's hockey, there are male head coaches. Can you imagine hiring a man to be the first coach of this women's team?
Like Teresa mentioned, we want to hire the best person for the role. Our league specifically, we have a good number of male head coaches and female head coaches. And so I think we're going to really go through the process. Like Teresa also mentioned, we'll have a ton of interest, and we really want something or someone in place that will reflect leadership and will reflect this team the proper way. And so, we'll just go through the process. We'll do our due diligence. We'll ensure that we cast a wide net, and we'll see who ends up winning that competition.
Okay, you mentioned Larry Tannenbaum, who, of course, everybody knows through the Maple Leafs and the Raptors, and the soccer and the Argos and the whole 9 yards, right?
Everything.
You got somebody else who's part of the ownership group here. Sheldon, you want to bring this picture up? Some people may have some vague understanding of who this person is. Yeah, that's Serena Williams, who's the greatest, you could argue, the greatest tennis player of all time. How'd you get her on board?
What's great about Serena is, she's walked away from tennis. She's evolved, is how she's talked about it, not retirement. And in that process, she's invested heavily in women. You look at her track record and what she's done. She was very, very vocal and talking about wanting to be owner of a WNBA team. She had already had a dialogue with the commissioner of our league about different teams and what the potential might be. So when we were awarded the franchise, the commissioner talked to Serena about that, and ultimately Larry and her had multiple conversations, and they really struck up a great partnership. And that's what's important, is they're really aligned on what they want this team to look like, what they believe this team can be, not only for the WNBA, but for all of Canada and even globally, like we talked about. And I mean, you said potentially the greatest of all time in tennis. Like, she could be potentially the greatest of all time of any
in
sport,
athletics.
in
That's
any
true.
athlete.
Of anything.
And when you can surround yourself by greatness, it elevates everyone.
Well,
so
okay,
both Monica and I had a chance to meet her, and she was part of the process. We talked about kind of like what we wanted this team to be about and what we were going to prioritize. So we're really excited to have her on board. She's a very busy woman, so she's not going to be here every single day or anything like that. That's not the expectation, but she has a lot of passions and a lot of places that she's going to lean into when she has the time and availability.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because Monica, I mean, obviously, in terms of trying to teach a winning spirit, a winning attitude, the commitment you need to make to be a champion, she can tell you all about that. I don't know that she knows anything about basketball, though. So what role do you see for her in that regard with this team?
Well, similar to what Teresa said, I think she's one we can really tap into when we need to have athletes really understand the vision of ownership. I think that because she's a champion in so many ways, Larry is a champion. We really want that to be into the fabric of our culture. I really think that, I think the players will be really excited to really touch base with Serena. She'll really help us, I think, in a lot of ways during free agency, in attracting top talent here who wants to win, who wants to be a part of a championship culture, and so on. I think the sky's the limit for the possibilities of ways we can utilize her in order to make sure that this team is going to be top tier in our league.
Can I ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to give us a two-shot here in the studio right now, because I would like to see that. Okay, that's the new logo of the team.
Looks great, right?
And, well, I wanted to get your opinion about this. Number one,
I'm biased. To be clear, I'm very biased. Well, I helped create this logo.
I understand. So first of all, the name Tempo, the logo, the colors. How do you decide upon all of that, and why did you land on these?
Yeah, well, I mean, the greatest thing is that it wasn't just me. Right? When we got the team May 23rd of 2024, the first question I was asked by everybody was, what's the team name? What's the team name?
Of course.
And yes, the name and logo, all those things are going to live on forever, but so will the story of how it was created, right? People still talk about the Raptors when they were named as a contest in the paper, and we knew that we wanted that story to be one of all of Canada. So we did nameyourteam.ca. We got over 10,000 submissions, over 1,000 unique names, and Tempo was one of them, submitted multiple times by multiple people. And we went through an entire process. We had academics that that all they do is inclusive design work, and we had them look through the different submissions. We had a community council made up of people across the country in different areas of expertise that lend their thoughts to it. And the whole thing, we were really transparent. So we actually have a podcast. It's called Bringing Home the W. It's 7 episodes, and it takes you behind the scenes of every single step that we took to get to the end of our name and logo. I highly recommend episode 3. It's called Cutting Room Floor. So it talks about those, 1,000 names that didn't make the cut and why.
What was the worst, stupidest name that you didn't pick?
I wouldn't say it was worse or stupid. It just wasn't right for us. But if we had gone with the name that was the most submitted, we would be called the Toronto Raptors. And that just wasn't going to work.
No.
Right? So there's not that the Toronto Raptors is a bad name.
Did it not occur to people that name had already been taken?
I think that they really liked it. I'm not sure. All I have to say is that that's not a stupid name at all. It's an incredible name. I love it. It's just not right for us. So we went with tempo. We love tempo. Ultimately, it rose to the top because it kind of created a new category because it actually talks about the game of basketball. Mm-hmm. And rarely do you have a name in any sport that relates to the game being played. So we really like that concept. And then the logo itself, we feel like it has a lot of movement. A lot of logos have something that's encumbering it, right? So it's in a circle, it's in a letter, it's part of a animal. Like this is unencumbered. There's actually movement there, and we really like the feeling of it. And then colors, it was interesting because when we started, the agency had kind of asked, was there no or no-go places? And one thing I said was, well, we don't want to be blue or red because those colors are really owned in this marketplace specifically by other teams. Mm-hmm. We went with versions of blue and red, but
it's off.
I think what works is it's our own modern twist on those two colors, right? So red is very prevalent in this marketplace. I mean, Canada, you think of the flag, it's red. Obviously, the Raptors, TFC, and then blue, like Blue Jays, Leafs,
Argos,
absolutely. But Bordeaux and hydrogen blue is our own little twist on it, and we think that we stand out in that way, yet complementing all those teams as well.
Now, Monica, I should ask you, because we got people watching us and listening to us right now who are not basketball fans, and they will not appreciate necessarily what the word tempo means. As a philosophy of playing basketball, you're an ex-player. Just to help us understand what that word means to you and the significance of it here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very significant in the game of basketball and even more in our league. The tempo really is like the cadence at which a team plays. And so a team can really, find itself playing to the tempo of what kind of talent it has, the style of play the coach wants to play. It can be fast, it can be slow. And I think, for our league, there are some obvious statistics and analytics by which the tempo can affect your wins and losses. And so specifically, we're a league that likes to play up tempo. We are a league that likes high pace, up and down, and that is, what wins in our league. There were times in our league in the past where teams actually played a slower, more efficient tempo, and they won with that. I can remember a Seattle Storm team with Lauren Jackson and Sue Bird that would score in the last 14 seconds of the shot clock, which was a very slow tempo team, but very efficient. And so when you look at a tempo of a basketball team, it really embodies, number one, how the coach feels that the talent that he puts on the floor, how they mold and gel, and how they become efficient together. And therefore you'll get, essentially a product on the floor that exemplifies that.
Monica, could you follow up on that by saying how the game you believe today is different in the WNBA from when you played?
Wow. Whew. Aging me here. I'll say this. When I played in the WNBA, the league was in its adolescence, and I do feel that the game had talented players. There was no lack of talent, and there's not a additional talent that's entering the league all of a sudden. There was always talented players in this league. I think where the league is shifted is that we're getting players now that have been specializing with basketball from a very young age. I think they're getting the resources and the training and the individualized plans from a high school age, where I feel like with my generation, we just went out to the playground and hooped it up with the neighborhood kids, and we ended up just being good based on our love for the game. I think now we're really grooming kids to really understand what it takes and the sacrifices and skill, work, and time and dedication that it takes to be a professional. And I think, our league is only going to get better from here.
Can we talk about that, please, Teresa? Because I think there might, are there 4 Canadian WNBA players in the whole league?
So last season, so in 2024, there's 4 Canadians on the rosters. So we'll see this year in 2025. The season's going to kick off here in about a month. Right now it's training camp, so those players are trying to make rosters. So we have an opportunity for more Canadians this season.
Okay,
Actually, one was just drafted last week. So we'll see if she can make the roster.
Well, this is what I'm wondering, because, of course, when I was a kid, there were no Canadians in the NBA. It was just
Right.
unheard of. Nowadays, it's not unusual at all. In fact, maybe the best player in the whole NBA,
Yeah.
or one of them anyway,
Yeah.
is from my hometown of Hamilton, Ontario.
That's right.
There we go,
That's
SGA. What kind of a pipeline is there right now from women playing basketball in high school in Canada to potentially someday being a WNBA star?
Yeah, what's incredible is that the pipeline is rich and deep right now. There's a lot of Canadian talent coming up. The national team has been at the top of global rankings for years, competing for medals in the Olympics for probably the last 3 or 4, definitely, maybe even before that. But what's incredible is what you're talking about on the men's side. You talked about Shea. He's now a
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
MVP candidate.
Yeah.
He came up right when the Raptors were coming up. And the existence of the Raptors, of the Vince Carter effect, has transformed basketball in this country
But that
for
takes
men.
20 years.
And I don't even think it's taken that long,
Yeah.
right? If you think about how those players have now come up and actually impacted. A lot of it is the infrastructure that Monica is referring to as well. But yeah, Canadians are represented in the NBA only second to U.S. And I feel like there's a great pathway for Canadians to fill that same level of commitment and impact in the WNBA very shortly.
Monica, it is absolutely true to say that the Toronto Blue Jays, as the only Canadian team in Major League Baseball, represent the whole country. You could say the same for the Raptors. They're the only Canadian team in the NBA. They represent all of Canada. Is it your hope that the Tempo, as the only Canadian team in the WNBA, will represent the whole country?
Absolutely. And, I fair say it's not only a hope, it's our commitment to ensure that we're inclusive of the entire country of Canada. I'm sure Teresa can speak to this more, but we'll be playing games all over the country in Montreal and Vancouver. Again, I'm hoping that those games and being able to cover such large territory inspires the next generation of young ballers to really one day want to play for their WNBA team in their home country of Canada. Also, what Teresa alluded to is the amount of talent up and coming in the country and how many of them, and I can really speak to the NCAA piece of it and how many of them are going through the NCAA pipeline and really having great careers in college and becoming draft prospects. And so it's our commitment to increase that number and have, young ballers coming up wanting to play for the Tempo one day.
Is it part of the plan to have, quote unquote, home games in the regular season by the Tempo in Montreal and Vancouver, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we're not committed to any sort of city right now, but it's definitely part of our plan. Unlike the Raptors, they started with the Grizzlies right beside them. Unlike the Blue Jays, they had the Expos for a long time. They're partners up here in Canada. We get to start as Canada's team.
Yeah.
So as Monica said, we're positioning ourselves that way. We're including all of Canada as part of this team's fan base from the very beginning. You'll see us out in marketplaces this summer before we're even having any players. And then ultimately, we want to have home regular season games outside of the Toronto market. So stay tuned for that. We have to work with those different markets and obviously with the league very, very closely in scheduling those, making sure that fits within the competitive landscape of the league as a whole. But they're on side too. They want to see this game and this league grow, and they see the huge opportunity from coast to coast in Canada, which is why the Tempo is Canada's team.
Monica, I wonder as well whether we are sort of at a moment in the history of professional sports when it's really kind of a woman's moment, right? Like the Professional Women's Hockey League has started. It is, I went to a game, 5-6 weeks ago. It was great. There's women's pro soccer happening. Got the WNBA right now. Are we at a moment, do you think, for women's pro sports?
I think Teresa always says it best. This is not a moment, it's a movement. And then I'll just add that, in my mind, there's always been talent in women's sports. I think we're just at a point where we have the eyes, we have the investment, and people are really starting to take notice. And so I think, the biggest thing for me is to ensure that I steward this properly and create sustainability and longevity for our team and our on-court product. And I think that, the sky's the limit again for women's sports, especially in Canada.
Well, okay, let me follow up, Teresa, with you in this regard. The NBA has been around since 1946. So in some respects, they've got a 50-year head start on you guys.
Yeah.
Is that a problem for you to try to, you ideally would like to be on a par with the male game, but they got a 50-year head start. So what do you do about that?
Well, you keep making progress every single day. You're exactly right. Like we're not going to wake up tomorrow and have all be equal in everything. Like that's just not going to happen because of that 50 years. But what is happening is the cumulative effect is happening, and that curve, we're going up it exponentially. And if you look at where the NBA was at in their 30th year, we're way ahead of them. So it's basically everything that they've done to help build the game of basketball and everything we can learn from what they've done in the early years, we've been able to put into our playbook and exponentially expedite that growth.
I think that's, that appears to be the case because you certainly have the ownership of the WNBA teams is much deeper pockets. You've got broadcast contracts already in a way that the other guys didn't have. The other thing, 30 years in to the NBA, I'm sorry to say, was a league mired in terrible, drug addiction issues and all of that kind of thing. What have you, I presume at some point the league has to have a heart-to-heart talk with all the players about gambling, about drugs, about who you hang out with and all of that kind of stuff. Do you do that?
Oh, absolutely. The league, and Monica, as a former player, knows from the very beginning they've had their players at the heart of everything they do. And what they're trying to do is create an incredible environment where they can be their best selves and be the best player they possibly can be. So the resources that they have is only increasing. What's incredible is to see, and this is not just in the WNBA, but across women's sports and even men's sports, athletes who are entering the league are so much more sophisticated. The NIL process, the name, image, likeness that they're in the NCAA, a lot of these athletes are coming into the league as full brands. They understand the power that they have and the impact that they can have for themselves and their ability to make money, but then also in the communities that they're part of. And I don't think that we've ever had a group of young people entering the league with that much understanding of how they can impact and grow this league, both as an individual and the team, as ever before, which is also going to help with the growth. So yeah, I think that there's also a greater understanding, like Monica said before, the resources weren't there, so you just play because you loved it. Now there's a much greater understanding of how to take care of your body, how to get peak performance. They've seen people who have extended their careers and they know all the things that they need to do in order to do that for themselves.
Yeah, like Monica, I know the salaries today are not what they presumably are going to be in 10 years' time, for example. So maybe you could tell us, based on your experience as a player, what you have to be careful of, because before long, people are going to be coming at players to, I'm sorry to say this, but it's a fact in sports nowadays. You got to watch out who you hang out with. There are people with nefarious influences who are going to want to get people to throw games and all sorts of crazy stuff, right? How do you guard against that?
Well, I think it's going to be tough to really guard against that kind of thing. But, just adding kind of to what Teresa was mentioning about our league is that, that with a women's league, you get so many different kinds of players that come to the table. And I think with our players, there's a collective consciousness that we do have to stand for something and that we are working toward a common goal, which is pushing the game of women's basketball and women in professional sports globally. And so with that, our players really are about some really high level things, and where they love to get out into the community. They will speak up and speak out for marginalized communities. They love to take action and make sure that they are standing on the right things and that they do it collectively, and so that they're using their voices and their platforms for things that they believe in. And so that, to me is just why women's sports is so beautiful, why women's sports is just something that you cannot stop investing in, because when you do that, you really bring along so many other groups of people and communities that are benefiting from the things that those players believe in and their investment in them.
Understood.
And even you mentioned the PWHL launching, NSL launching, it was incredible, Toronto AFC launching, and the tempo was there and the scepters are there. Like, we all understand that we're part of this larger community, and the WNBA has really been leading the way in that. And I think, like what Monica alludes to, is we all understand there's something bigger at play here. And I think it's something that is unique to women's sports. And it's really great to see these people all come together. We don't have, a lot of people when we first launched saw us as competitors, but we've never seen us that way. We've seen us as like, we can help each other grow and we can all rise.
Well, I look forward to the first game of the Toronto Tempo, which will be May of 2026.
That's
is that
correct,
right?
yeah.
And your home arena is going to be?
The Coca-Cola Coliseum. So,
at the X.
Yeah, we can't wait. And like I said, we'll be playing games across Canada, so stay tuned for some of those announcements. But we can't wait to call Coca-Cola home. We'll be roommates with the Scepters
That's
there.
right, they're there.
It'll be incredible. And thanks for telling our story. I mean, that's something that I say over and over is this team is going to be successful. This marketplace is ready off the top, your first question. But for us to truly optimize the opportunity, we need people to fall in love with us who have never, ever followed sports, much less women's basketball. So thank you for telling our story.
We wish you well. Monica Wright-Rogers, new general manager of the Toronto Tempo, and Teresa Resch, president of the Toronto Tempo. Thanks for visiting us at TVO tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine.
Thanks for having us.
And that is the agenda for Monday, May the 5th, 2025. We want to remind you that on Saturday, May the 10th, I'll be in the Hammer for our next TVO Today live event. Joining me will be Canadian musicians Sarah Harmer, Tom Wilson, and Cadence Weapon to talk about the power of music and musicians in our culture. And it's free. So check out tvo.org/TVO Today Live for free tickets. That's Saturday, May 10th, 7 p.m. in Hamilton. Now, tomorrow on the program, we'll look at whether Prime Minister Mark Carney's new government can solve an old housing problem. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.